What's up, everybody? Jack here with another episode of the Big and Bold College Football Show. And today I've got a preview for my Michigan Wolverine fans. Of course, Michigan plays Northern Illinois this weekend. It's far from their biggest game on their schedule. But of course I wanted to drop a preview for it and talk about a few main points. I've kind of condensed this down to 3 main topics. And I made sure that these were applicable to the entire season, not just specific to this one game. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about Northern Illinois thus far in the season, kind of preview the opponent, and then I'm going to talk about those 3 main topics for the Wolverines. To start the season, Northern Illinois went to Georgia Tech, where they pulled off an upset victory, 22-21. Majority of that coming by way of running back Harrison Whaley, 27 carries for 144 yards and a touchdown. He looked very impressive as their bell cow back, and the same could be said for their following game, in which they lost 50-43 at home against the Wyoming Cowboys. In that game, he had 26 carries for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not to mention Clint Radkovich, big fella for them, 6 carries for 63 yards and 3 touchdowns on the game. So they did a lot of work on the ground. Problem for them was that they were outscored 28-10 in the first half, putting up a whopping 33 points in the second half, but a little too little too late for them in that game. But the other note of significance has to be starting quarterback Rocky Lombardi. Now, if you recognize that name, that's because he was the starting quarterback for Michigan State last year, when Michigan State walked into Ann Arbor and tossed Michigan one of their most embarrassing losses in the last handful of years. Of course, Michigan was a 30-point favorite in that game after coming off a huge win against Minnesota. Meanwhile, Michigan State was coming off of an embarrassing loss to Rutgers. So Rocky Lombardi has since transferred to Northern Illinois, where it's been a little night and day for him. They had their Week 1 performance against Georgia Tech, where, he gave them fairly efficient play. 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like I said, they did a lot of work on the ground there, where a majority of their yardage came from. But he played a solid game for them and played it fairly safe. Against Wyoming, he tossed 3 interceptions. So they definitely don't want him slinging the football out there. They want to run a bit more of a balanced offense, run Harrison Whaley, run Clint Radkovich, and use Rocky Lombardi to convert key third downs, make those 1 or 2 throws a game they need him to make. So that's really where Northern Illinois is at right now. When you look at Michigan, to jump into my 3 main points for the game, which is how often is Cade McNamara going to throw the football. You look at their first game against Western, he only attempted 11 passes. Their next game against Washington, he only attempts 15. And he looked a little shaky in that Washington game as well, only completing 7 to 15 passes for 44 yards, which is pretty far away from his game against Western, where he was 9 for 11, 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. The fan base has been really vocal thus far, not so much about how much Michigan is running the football. There's a lot of positive energy and a positive spotlight being placed on the Wolverines for how well they can run the football. When you go for 335 and 3 against Western, and then 343 and 4, the run game was even better against Washington. And we all know how good Washington's defense has been. That's what everyone's been talking about for Washington the last few years. Clearly, Michigan's got one of the best run games in the country. Certainly the best in the Big Ten right now. But the problem is it an inability to throw the football, or almost the lack of interest to throw the football because they put themselves into such prominent positions early. In the first quarter against Western, it was a 10-7 ball game. Cade threw the football fairly well. Not a whole lot of concern there. Then Michigan puts up 17 points in the second quarter, and that's ball game. Michigan dominated the rest of the way. The second half, it was Michigan's lead 20-7 in terms of points scored between the third and fourth quarter. Now in the Washington game, 3-0 first quarter for Michigan. Cade had 1 good throw on the day. I thought he made 1 really good pass to Cornelius Johnson. But other than that, the rest of the game, it was all on the run game to score points. I felt like they couldn't ask Cade to throw the football and get them in the end zone, in that first half when it was a 10-0 ball game. Now, of course, in the third quarter, then it goes up 17-3, and Michigan's feeling really confident. The run game is going very effective. The run game is very effective at that point. But it's understandable to be a little nervous for the fact that can Michigan throw the football? And I think the reason Wolverine fans are so nervous is because coming into the season, a lot of people were talking, oh, is this a 6-6 or 7-5 team? I thought that was a pretty outlandish prediction. Looked at them as more of a 9-win team. Now, this isn't confirmation bias for me saying, oh, they're definitely going to be a 9-win team now. Not what this is. But I think that after their first 2 games, the defense didn't fall apart with a new defensive coordinator. Their run game is the best in the Big Ten. I think people have some hope and belief that Michigan can be better than what a lot of people have been predicting them to be. But to achieve that, they need to get the passing offense going, which is true. Now again, nobody's saying that they need to be able to throw the football to beat Northern Illinois. But they're going to need to throw the football to beat Wisconsin and Penn State and Ohio State. Now, if you didn't think they were going to do that coming into the season, then you shouldn't care what their passing offense is, because you thought they were going to win 6 games. My main point here is Michigan needs to let Cade run a balanced offense, I think, for the first quarter of the game. We all know that Michigan can run the ball. I think they know that Michigan can run the ball well. But let it be a bit more of a balanced offense. Let Cade make some throws, build his confidence a little bit, because he's aware of the criticism the passing game is getting. And maybe work out some kinks that the passing game might have against an obviously very beatable opponent in Northern Illinois. Now, I don't think they're going to test themselves all that much against Northern Illinois, at least in their passing game. But when you have Rutgers the following week, that looks a little bit more challenging than Northern Illinois. When you have, obviously, Wisconsin the week after that on the road, they're going to have to throw the football. I mean, that's what broke open the Wisconsin-Penn State game in week 1. You know, was a wide open Jahan Dotson, busted the game open for them and gave Penn State a huge touchdown and kind of a swing of momentum for them. So they really do want to get some passes under Cade's belt. I would like to see him complete at least 10 to 12 passes in this game before I assume J.J. McCarthy steps in to take over if Michigan builds up a big lead on Northern Illinois. Not to mention, being Northern Illinois, they don't need to run Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins into the ground anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like they had a whole lot of big hits on those first 2 games, especially Blake Corum, who busted open a lot of big runs. But don't run them into the ground. Allow Cade to run the offense a little bit and make some passes. So that's my first point. I want to see between, at least 10 or 12 completions out of him in this game before he gets benched for J.J. McCarthy, because I assume that's going to happen probably in the 3rd or 4th quarter. My second point is more of a criticism of the Wolverines' defense. And that's, when we were going into the Washington game, I wanted to see them get more sacks. I wanted to see them get to the quarterback more. They only had 1 sack in their week 1 game against Western. In their week 2 game against Washington, they had 4 sacks and 5 quarterback hurries. They were all over him in that game. This week, I want to see Michigan pick off the quarterback. I noticed when I was looking at, writing up a preview for this game, Michigan doesn't have an interception on the season. Now, they have some passes defended, right? 6 passes defended against Western Michigan and a whopping 9 against Washington. So they've gotten their hands on the football multiple times, but they haven't been able to come up with any picks. So I would kind of like to see the Wolverines secondary picking off the quarterback. Get some revenge on Rocky Lombardi. That guy walked into the big house last year with Michigan State, your in-state rival, and dropped 3 touchdowns on you. A lot of those guys are on this team. So go out there. I'm looking at Vincent Gray, Daxton Hill, who's an absolute stud, and quite frankly, as a playmaker, should have an interception by week 3 of the season. Brad Hawkins, a leader in their secondary at safety. DJ Turner, those guys at corner, they need to come up with an interception or multiple in this game. If they force Northern Illinois to have to throw the football to come back, think like their Wyoming game. They were down 28-10, and they have to throw the football to compete. Wyoming picked off Lombardi 3 times. I don't see why the Wolverines can't pick them off 3 times as well. So that's going to be a big one for me. That's going to help me feel a little bit better about their secondary. You know, I've had nothing but good things to say about Michigan's front 7. But their secondary has been a little lacking in my eyes. So I'd love to see them rebound in that way. Not rebound necessarily, but I'd love to see them make more game-changing plays. Especially when you have some elite talent like Daxton Hill, you know what I mean, in the secondary. And my third and final point for this game, you know, again, I talked about let's see their passing offense throw the ball a little bit more while the game is still within 21 points. And let's see the secondary make some more impactful plays. You know, I want to see them pick off the quarterback. And my third and final note for this game, and it's a pretty obvious one, I'm going to be honest. I put a little bit more brain power into the first 2. Not that it was too difficult to think of those, right? I mean, everybody's talking about how Michigan, you know, they're a little nervous about throwing the football or their ability to throw the football. And of course, it's pretty easy to identify, man, they don't have any interceptions for their first 2 games. It's keep the team healthy. Honestly, it's keep the team healthy. You know, they lost Ronnie Bell week 1, their number 1 wide receiver. I think wide receiver is still the strength. You know, I talked about that in my breakdown for the Wolverines, where they have a lot of depth, a lot of speed, a lot of size at the position. So losing Ronnie Bell is unfortunate, but not a deal breaker for the team. But I did talk about how they have an issue of depth at a lot of different positions. That's what makes me nervous. So I know it sounds a little weird, but yes, they suffered a significant injury at the best possible position, if that makes sense. Like, if they were going to lose a starter anywhere, quite frankly, wide receiver was the one to do it at. Like I said, they don't need to run Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins into the ground against Northern Illinois. Once those guys get into the 14 or 15 carry range apiece, I expect that they should probably be pulled off the field, in all honesty. Once Cade completed 10 to 12 passes, hopefully they're in a position to where they can come off the field. Now, of course, a lot of this rhetoric is in the fact that I believe they're going to be up by 21 points by the time the third quarter rolls around, or in the third quarter. You know, keeping the team healthy, getting those guys off the field before you maybe suffer an unfortunate injury, because after their first 4 games, that's where their schedule turns the difficulty up a notch. Now, the reason a lot of people thought Michigan was going to lose a lot of games was in part because Washington looked like a great team coming into the season. You know, they were an AP poll 20th ranked team. Of course, they've fallen off quite a bit. They're still a good team. I mean, it was a great win for the Wolverines, but in their first 4 games, it would appear that their most difficult contest could be Rutgers in that 4th week. You know, a team they went into overtime with last year. After that, though, it's really when things turn up, and you got to go to Wisconsin to play a tough, experienced Wisconsin team. You get Northwestern at home, who has potential. You know, Pat Fitzgerald's a great coach, but they're a program that looks like a mess right now, who has to replace a lot of production from last year. You have to go to East Lansing for that in-state rivalry game with Michigan State. You get Indiana, who beat the Wolverines last year, at Penn State, who's the 10th ranked team in the country right now. And then, of course, at the end of the year, you got Ohio State, who, yeah, Ohio State looks vulnerable, you know what I mean, defensively, and the game is in the big house, but even when Michigan was the favorite and arguably the better team, it didn't help them beat the Buckeyes. So you've got about 5 games there in the second half of their schedule where I'm like, you know, I'm a little nervous about that. So keep the team healthy, right into the second half of your year. Start off that Wisconsin game without having to use the excuse of injuries, right? So keep the team healthy. And this is a 2 birds with 1 stone thing. Getting those young guys on the field. You know, it's great to see J.J. McCarthy take the field. It's great to see Donovan Edwards get on the field. You know, those freshmen and future players of those positions. Get freshmen like, you know, Greg Crippen at center out there. Maybe Raheem Anderson or Tristan Bounds. Those are a couple other freshman guys. Zach Zinter is another one if he's not starting. Nolan Rumler, Trent Jones. Crap ton of offensive linemen that could get on the field for this team. Get some reps in. in the event that later on in the year they do need to see the field. Get some of those young guys out there on defense. Improve your depth by getting them on the field and getting reps. And increase that confidence you have in the positions for the future when next year or the following, these guys are becoming starters. So when you have a game like Northern Illinois where you're such a massive favorite, that's a really big deal in this game. So I do want to see that happen. You know, every now and then you see programs leave starters out there for a little bit too long, makes you a little uncomfortable, you know what I mean? So that's definitely my 3 key points for this Northern Illinois game. I talked about in my previous episode how next week I'm going to be rolling up my overview for the Northern Illinois game and my preview for the Rutgers game into one. Now, unless Michigan suffers their biggest upset loss since App State, not going to be a whole lot I'm going to cover in this Northern Illinois game. And then, of course, Rutgers is a legitimate program. Greg Schiano's got them moving in the right direction. But they played a close one with Syracuse. I don't know really how I feel right now about the Rutgers program. So that's going to be next week's Michigan special episode for my Wolverine fans. Hope you guys liked this episode. So far, though, season's going great, right? It's hard to be upset. I understand that sort of nervous anxiety over the passing game. But I think this is a really good start to the season, and I don't think it could have went much better than it has for the Wolverines after 2 games. But like I said, guys, in a few weeks, the season really kicks up. I'm going to have a big preview of that Wisconsin game in a few weeks once that's going. Check out my other episodes talking all things college football. Stay up to date on what's going on out there with other programs. And thanks for listening, Wolverine fans. Go Blue.